President Bola Tinubu's reforms have been blamed for creating rampant inflation in Nigeria and the worst cost of living crisis in a generation. The government says the reforms are necessary to jumpstart an economy that's barely growing. But the people are having none of it, and they have begun protests demanding that the government reinstates the fuel subsidies which President Bola Tinubu took away last year. This is Africanews Live Debate. Welcome. Welcome again to the Africanews Live Debate. My name is Ronald Kato. So, in Nigeria, since last Thursday, protests have been going on against the government demanding reforms, including the reinstatement of a fuel subsidy that President Bola Tinubu took away last year. The Africanews Live Debate is an online interactive show where we discuss the major topical issues on the continent, and we ask you to get involved. We are live on all our social media platforms. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube and on Twitter, and we would like you to have your say. So the demonstrations in Nigeria have, if you want, similarities with those that have been happening in Kenya. In both countries, citizens are blaming the government for creating the worst cost of living crisis in a generation and are demanding immediate reforms, not just reforms to do with the economy, but also political reforms. Before we get started, our motion for today's debate is Tinubu's reforms, solution or source of pain. Here's our reporting from the first day of the protests last Thursday.
On Sunday, demonstrators in Lagos expressed their thoughts on an early request by Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to halt the weeks-long protest in the country against economic challenges.
As the president of this country, I must ensure public order in line with the constitutional oath to protect the lives and property of every citizen. Our government will not stand idly by and allow a few with a clear political agenda to tear this nation apart. Under the circumstances, I hereby enjoin protesters and the organizers to suspend any further protest and create room for dialogue.
The protests, which commenced on Thursday, have been marked by reports of looting and vandalism, along with allegations of security personnel employing excessive force.
President's speech this morning is below expectation. It means a golden opportunity to show empathy, to connect with the pains, agony of Nigerians. It means a golden opportunity to show leadership. Because it suggests to me it's not sensitive to the plight of Nigeria.
I'm really disappointed on what President said this morning on the speech, because he did not even mention about the words with dialogue. What demands, he did not even mention about it. He was just telling us stories that do not concern us.
The demonstrations are a reflection of the widespread frustration with the severe cost of living crisis in Nigeria.
There will be no more gathering here or anywhere. Any of such gathering is unlawful and illegal. And if such gathering exists, we are going to apply the full weight of the law.
According to Amnesty International, 9 protesters were killed during clashes with law enforcement, while 4 others died in a bombing incident.
You're watching Africanews Live Debate. Time to introduce our guests now. We have Mr. Bismarck Rewane, an economist and financial analyst, joining us from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Mr. Rewane, for making time for the show.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us from Lagos is Mr. Ogra. Is the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Digital Communication. Thank you, Ortega, for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we expect Mr. Sanyaolu Juwon, the National Coordinator of the Take It Back movement, to join us during the course of the program. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Before I proceed, I'd like to remind you that we are broadcasting live on our social media platforms, and we ask you to head there to have your say. Are President Bola Tinubu's reforms a solution or a source of pain? I would like to start with you, Ortega. There seems to be broad agreement that the reforms by President Bola Tinubu were indeed needed to jumpstart the economy. But the way the president went about it, it was chaotic and disorganized. I mean, it was easy to predict that the way he went about it would cause massive disruption. But he went ahead with it anyway.
Thank you very much. So I would like to say it is very important that we situate the beginning of the reforms properly. This was a country where, as at the day the president was taken over, by law, the subsidies were already stopped because the previous government did not budget for it beyond that date. And since November 2021, the previous government had said they wouldn't budget for subsidies beyond that day. So by law, the president, couldn't have extended the subsidies anyway. And then you look at the flows of the foreign exchange, and all that. It was very important that had to go. Money was flowing from, hand to hand, and a lot of people were making unnecessary gains to the detriment of the people, to the detriment of the economy, and to the detriment of development and infrastructure projects. So those two had to go. The rent-seeking behavior that those two things had enabled, had to be stopped. Secondly, we do admit, and the president has admitted in his speech on July 31st, 2023, that he knows that there is a gap, between, the removal of the fuel subsidy and the coming on of various interventions that he put in place. Those interventions include the students' loan, which was expected to take away, a lot of burden from, families for paying for school fees and the rest. It included the presidential CNG initiative, which was, an initiative to ensure that Nigeria could use its gas resources, which we have in enormous quantities, to switch from premium motor spirits, PMS. As of today, the PCNG initiative has started to convert, commercial vehicles, taxis, buses, haulage trucks, and the rest for free or at little to no cost, because it's cheaper than, even PMS at the subsidized rates for them to use that. It also included the setting of the credit score. The credit score was intended, to ensure that Nigeria moves from a completely cash-based economy to an economy where, people could actually pay for basic things, basic needs and necessities, using credits. Amongst other things, the government also introduced, automation into, putting its revenues in order. And that has seen, as at the first half of this year, 9.1 trillion in aggregate government revenues, coming from about 4.5 trillion, as at the same time last year. So the most important thing to know is that, yes, we admit things are not easy on Nigerians. The president has said that, but the president is also, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has also pleaded with Nigerians to give him some time, so that this reform starts to bear fruits. Like he has said, you cannot build on a foundation that is faulty. And we will all agree that the foundation upon which the Nigerian economy was based was extremely faulty. There was little to no productivity. You had a lot of arbitrary opportunities for, fifth elements and fifth columnists to take advantage of, and all those things. Those had to go. The anti-corruption fight is, it's moving on at great steam. And as at last week, even during the president's address, he announced that 100 billion naira from proceeds recovered from proceeds of crime, and corrupt activities are being added, 50 billion to the students' loan and 50 billion, to the credit score. So a lot of things are going on at the same time. It's hectic. It may look chaotic, but at the same time, at the end of the day, Nigeria needs to go through this to get where we need to be.
Mr. Bismarck Rewane, Ortega makes the case, and articulately, that the government has been making for some time, but surely there was a way to reduce the impact and the scale of the shock from taking away the subsidies and currency devaluation, right?
Yes, I agree with you, but I think I want to add a few points that Ortega has made. One is that subsidies were not removed, subsidies were reduced, right? And the goal of subsidy reduction, right, was to actually move money from the consumers to the government with the hope that that money will be recycled quickly into sectors that will increase output and therefore actually minimize inflation. That is one. Two, that the policy changes that were announced without institutional reform made the implementation and execution of that strategy faulty. Three is that sequencing of the reforms or the policy changes. One was on petrol subsidy, which is used as an acronym for all types of subsidies. Two was the exchange rate realignment, which actually unification of exchange rates. Three and others were electricity tariffs and all the other policy changes that were announced. But it was not complemented with a tight monetary policy which could actually rein in inflation. So there was a mis-sequencing, if I may use that term. And then there was the fact that the institutional reform that is required to execute and translate these policy changes into tangible results for the people were not done. So that's where we are, and that led to instability. Instability, fast forward 6-9 months, the macroeconomic instability had led to forms of hardship. And therefore, the hashtag bad governance, hardship, and cost of living crisis are just many forms of saying the same thing. How do these things manifest themselves? They manifest themselves simply by food inflation, which is as high as 35%, a currency that has lost 3 times its value in the past year or two, unemployment rate which has not been dimensioned properly, but we know that we can feel it, and suboptimal growth in the sense that output growth is lower than population growth. And the people were kind of tired of excuses and without solutions. So we are where we are. The situation has to be stabilized and then followed by a reset button, and we go back, and once it's stabilized, then we now do the proper sequencing. So our view is that the stabilization plan itself has to be very well articulated and executed, which is what the core problem is today. We have to do that, and that has to be done like yesterday. And two, the reset button has to be pressed and proper sequencing. But more than anything else, the credibility and the trust deficit in the country between the governed and the governing has actually expanded. So whether they're speeches or no speeches, what people want are results. Obviously, the protest, I think, has fizzled or is fizzling out, but it's an opportunity not to take it for granted, but to go back to the drawing board very quickly to ensure, one, that the policies are well articulated, well communicated at the same time, and the institutional reform that must take place simultaneously with the policy changes that have been announced should be clear to everybody, and then the results and the impact can be felt. There are the lags between when you announce policies and when the impact is felt. And
interesting submission, Mr. Rewane. I would just like to update that Mr. Sanyaolu Juwon, the national coordinator of the Take It Back movement, has joined us. Can you hear us, Juwon?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you for making time for the show. I would like to mention that President Bola Tinubu addressed the country on Sunday night, and there was reaction to his speech from the different sections of the Nigerian society. I would like us to take a look at that reporting that we did about the reaction to the president's address before we proceed.
On Sunday, demonstrators in Lagos expressed their thoughts on an early request by Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to halt the weeks-long protest in the country against economic challenges.
As the president of this country, I must ensure public order in line with the constitutional oath to protect the lives and property of every citizen. Our government will not stand idly by and allow a few with a clear political agenda to tear this nation apart. Under the circumstances, I hereby enjoin protesters and the organizers to suspend any further protest and create room for dialogue.
The protests, which commenced on Thursday, have been marked by reports of looting and vandalism, along with allegations of security personnel employing excessive force.
President's speech this morning is below expectation, because it means a golden opportunity to show empathy, to connect with the pains, agony of Nigerians. It means a golden opportunity to show leadership. Because it suggests to me it's not sensitive to the plight of Nigeria.
I'm really disappointed on what President said this morning on the speech, because he did not even mention about the words with dialogue. What demands, he did not even mention about it. He was just telling us stories that do not concern us.
The demonstrations are a reflection of the widespread frustration with the severe cost of living crisis in Nigeria.
There will be no more gathering here or anywhere. Any of such gathering is unlawful and illegal. And if such gathering exists, we are going to apply the full weight of the law.
According to Amnesty International, 9 protesters were killed during clashes with law enforcement, while 4 others died in a bombing incident.
Yes.
Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, this is the Africanews Live Debate. It's an online interactive show where we discuss the topical issues on the continent. This week we're discussing President Bola Tinubu's reforms in Nigeria, and we're asking whether they are a solution or a source of pain. Sanyaolu, the president spoke to you, the protesting citizens, on Sunday night and said, I see your pain, I feel it, but we have to endure it because things are going to get better, not now, but later, and urged you to stand down, stay back. Why haven't you done that?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot for your question. The president did not address protesters. His speech, in real sense, was blackmailing protesters, as we've all heard. He kept, rather than addressing the issues and the demands of protesters, the president simply ignored all demands as if they never existed, and went on a blackmailing spree. That protests were politically motivated and what have you. But unfortunately for Mr. President, the demands are real, and they remain real. His speech went ahead, going about reading out various statistics with regards to the scorecard of his administration or what his administration have done. But in reality, the president's scorecard out here is completely different. In his speech, he did say he advised, he was calling on protesters to shun off, to call off or suspend protesters, as though the protests were called or planned from within the Aso Villa. If you look at some of the scorecard the president, according to him, had reeled out, it's ironic, because when the president says that some counts as an achievement, 70,000 naira minimum wage. It's funny, because this 70,000 naira minimum wage cannot even afford to buy a bag of rice. That's the truth. As a matter of fact, the president's minimum wage was a downward review from even what it was when he came in May 2023. I think May 2023, the 30,000 naira was worth about $60 or 60 something dollars. But now the so-called 70,000 naira minimum wage now worth barely $49 or maybe even less. So if minimum wage of 70,000 naira, as I used to say, was such a smart idea, I think the president may do well to start by ensuring his entire cabinet and members of National Assembly are placed on such ridiculous amounts of wages. If his policies of fuel subsidy removal that had led to biting inflation, amongst other factors, if they were such a bad idea, I wonder why the entire president, his cabinet crew, and members of National Assembly continue to spend huge resources out of our taxpayers' money to buy petrol in the market. As a matter of fact, these people don't go to the market; they don't buy petrol in the market. Tinubu, for instance, have been living off taxpayers' money since he was a senator during the military regime. So they are completely disconnected from the life of the average Nigerian person. Nigerians cannot even afford to buy the cheapest food in the market, which is garri, because inflation rate is way over 40%. So this is President Tinubu's scorecard. President Tinubu's scorecard is that thousands of young people are dropping out of school because of increment in fee hike across Nigerian campuses. This is the reality on the ground. But of course, in the speech, he said there is some sort of student loan. But students don't have to become debtors to go to school. Students deserve grants and not loans. The president did not go to school from loans. So these are some of the issues that we think that the president in his demand should have talked about and addressed. He did not address them. He completely ignored all of these demands as though they never existed at all. So he made other blackmailing remarks about the protest, which is about that people were looting, the insecurity that they were looting and everything across the country.
Thank you, Sanyaolu.
I think it's important I address 2 points. Yes, that is raised.
Sanyaolu says the president is detached. He's tone deaf. What's your response?
Before I answer that, I would like to address 2 things that is raised. Trying to couch them under the word blackmailing. It's easy to sit there or to sit anywhere and say, oh, someone is blackmailing the other person. But we need to have some valid conversations with ourselves as Nigerians, regardless of if we're in government or if we're, the regular citizenry. Let's look at it. You say the minimum wage of 70,000 is a downgrade from what it was a couple of months ago. How would you say so? You're doing the conversions from naira to dollars, straight conversions. That is, at the best, roadside economics. If you were to properly do that, you adjust whatever it was for inflation and adjust it for whatever other economic, indices and come to a price. So let's look at it. As of 2015 or 2013, the minimum wage was 30,000. If you adjust that for inflation, the minimum wage today, that same 30,000 today, is worth about 69 to 70,000 naira. So it's not normally a downgrade. It's not a downgrade. It's just that you're calculating wrongly. And I understand emotions are rife. I would be one of the first to say that things are not the best for Nigerians. The inflation rates, yes, it went up on the back of certain policies that were in place, but inflation rates, we're saying it's gradually reducing, month on month. That is progress. I hope you understand that. And then you come up to say, oh, the president did not speak to people, did not speak to protesters. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the president for all Nigerians, protesting public and non-protesting public inclusive. That is something we ought to realize. He swore an oath to protect the lives and properties of every single Nigerian, regardless of the fact that you're protesting or not. If as president, he has reports saying that, hey, in some states of this country, the protests have gone very wrong. You've had fifth columnists and elements, unscrupulous elements, taking advantage of that to, destroy the properties of their fellow citizens. He has a duty and a responsibility, and law enforcement, by the Constitution, Section 43, gives them that mandate to actually go in there and protect the lives and properties of every Nigerian citizen that may, be under danger as a result of protests, for instance, going out of hand. No one is blackmailing anyone here.
If I may, I would just
Go
like
ahead,
to contrast the demands that the protesters have made and what the president said on Sunday. I'll just list a few points. On hunger, the protesters have said they want a 90-day plan to drastically reduce the cost of food. The president...
Would you want me to respond to it one by one, or you would...
Can I finish, please?
Like to listen then? Okay.
Yeah. The president made no substantial mention of immediate measures to lower the cost or improve the availability of food. On the high cost of living, the protesters have demanded the reduction in the prices of petroleum products and electricity tariffs. The president said that the prices won't come down and the tariffs won't be reduced. On End SARS, for example, the protesters have demanded for the release of all those still detained in relation to End SARS and implementation of judicial panel recommendations. The president made no mention of End SARS. On government waste and the bloated National Assembly, the protesters have demanded a 50% cut in the salaries of members of the National Assembly. The president made no mention of this demand. Isn't it then fair to say that the president is not listening, or at least is not responding?
So we can choose to be disingenuous and say the president did not respond to any of these things. On the situation of hunger and the price of ensuring the food gets to people, food security, the president's speech was laced with facts and initiatives that have been taken to do that. For instance, you cannot solve hunger without solving agricultural productivity. Mm-hmm. To do that, he mentioned in the speech that the government, to boost our agricultural output and yields per hectare, has already, started the imports of mechanized equipment, planters, tractors, and others, worth billions of nairas, CKDs and completed ones from Belarus, Brazil, and the US to Nigeria. Those are already on the way. So we're not even in the process of ordering. They have been ordered, they're on the way to being delivered. He also went further to say that he is talking with the state governments. By law, by the constitution, the states have ownership rights on land. He's speaking with the state governments, to ensure that we can get 10 million hectares of land for agricultural purposes. And that work cannot be done by the federal government alone. It's very important that Nigerians are able to delineate that we have different, different arms of government, different levels of government, and how they work. We need to understand that. The federal government in this situation can only bring all parties together and say, this is what we need. We need to put our people on the farms. We need to bring mechanized equipment to ensure that yield per hectare for various crops and everything. On ground, we provide you with the data, we provide you with inputs. In the past few months, the government has provided inputs, it's provided fertilizers, it's provided agricultural extension services to farmers and co who were affected last year by the Naira redesign program and were not able to plant as much as they could have done. So a lot of things have gone into place in ensuring food security. You also mentioned, sorry, I was writing as you were speaking, you also mentioned, the tariffs. People complain about the electricity tariffs, but what are the facts? Based on a couple of actions that have been taken since we got into government, one, you have about 12 to 13 million metered customers in Nigeria. Out of this 12 to 13 million, about 15% were enjoying, power of 20 to 24 hours daily. However, every single Nigerian metered customer was enjoying power, subsidies on the power. And these subsidies were as high as 80%. So what did the government say? The government said, for those of you who are getting 20 to 24 hours of electricity a day, why don't you pay the cost reflective tariffs on the electricity you get? Because if you get 20 to 24 hours a day, you are expected to be more productive. You're expected to be able to utilize that to get a lot of things that every other section of the country cannot get. And the government, what did the government do? The government said for the 85% of Nigerians remaining, we will continue to subsidize power for you at 60-something naira, per kilowatt hour that it was. And then move that 15% that was getting 20 to 24 hours a day, to the cost reflective tariffs. Because at the end of the day, we have gotten to that point in Nigeria where we cannot continue, to be unproductive. We cannot continue to, everything the government must do. There are certain things people need to start taking responsibility, for ensuring that they work with governments to get things to work. Power sector subsidies are still there for 85% of Nigerians. If you're being charged, and I say this again on this show, if you're being charged more than you should be charged because you're not getting 20 to 24 hours a day of electricity, if they're charging you the unsubsidized rates, for electricity, then you have the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Please make your reports to them, and they will take necessary action to remove you from that band or your feeders from that band.
I'd like to now bring in Mr. Bismarck Rewane. But just before I do that, I would like to remind you that we are broadcasting live on our social media platforms, and you can head there to watch the show. Plus, have your say, react to the issue that we're debating this afternoon, which is President Bola Tinubu's reforms the solution to Nigeria's economic problems or simply a source of pain? Mr. Rewane, the government has made a very good case of why it is doing what it is doing. And the protesters have articulated their demands. The government's plans are long term, but the Nigerian citizens want immediate relief. How does a government go about, a government, in a place such as what the Nigerian government finds itself in today? How does it go about bringing immediate relief to the citizens? Because they want relief now.
Yes, I agree. And that's why the conversation as to who was responsible and what the discussion was, to me, is counterproductive. What we need now, short-term solutions and long-term solutions. So let's take the short-term solutions. The short-term solutions announced so far: minimum wage, unconditional cash transfers, and to a large extent, cash transfers, stimulus package, and a minimum wage. Those are fiscal measures that need to be funded, right? But also the impact of them has to get to the people. Right. So far, the evidence shows that the intentions are good, but the impact is minimal. And therefore, like they said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Also, at the same time, simultaneously, we have had some monetary policy measures. One, freeing up this foreign exchange market. Two, increasing interest rates, and also managing money supply so that all those things come together. The short-term solution is using imports to substitute local food production. But the bottlenecks and the bureaucracy in the system has made it impossible for even the imported products to get to the market. So what is happening? There's a yawning gap between what the people are seeing and what they are hearing. Now, that the government has to do something to dismantle the bottlenecks so that the imported food can get to the market. And if they get to the market, and even the ones that are being produced locally, the government said they were releasing 42,000 metric tons of grains. That was not there. There were no grains. So there is a major gap between what is being announced and what is being done and what is being felt. So that has to be addressed, and that has to be done urgently. It's like an emergency. And I think the government is fully aware and are doing everything to do that. At the same time, simultaneously, institutional reform within the government, like I said earlier, and also going to the reset button to make sure that there's equilibrium. And I hate to sound abstract, but that's what it is, that the economic policy is consistent with its social safety net. Because a lot of people, Nigerians are in a poverty trap. Nigeria as a country has a debt overhang, and Nigeria as a country is underinvesting. Therefore, all of this and those are the medium to long-term goals that need to be, and strategies that need to be adopted. But short term, right now, the only way the people can feel this impact is that if the products get to the market, and I say get to the market in an efficient manner. What people are complaining about is that some of those products which are supposed to get to the market are cornered by agents of the government and agents of the state governors as well, and are being used and being sold at the marketplace. For example, the federal government of Nigeria is supposedly selling rice at 40,000 naira a bag to public servants. While today my team went to the market, the rice is being sold at 86,000 naira. And there's a big disconnect between the announcement of 40,000 naira and the effective price of 86,000 naira. That has to be brought to a halt immediately. If not, we are going to have this conversation of saying, well, this is the economy we met, and what some people call lame excuses. And this is the impact it's being felt. We need to, that bridge of communication has to be, that communication gap has to be bridged immediately. And the protesters have to understand that this thing cannot be done like a magic wand. It cannot be done like a magic wand. And therefore, holding the government.
On that note, Mr. Rewane, I'd like to go to Sanyaolu. Mr. Rewane says that you must understand that the solutions you're demanding, the demands you're making, can be acted on soon enough. And one can argue that the president has barely had any time to settle in and do the sort of things that you want him to do.
Yes, thank you. Let me start by responding to the president's special advisor, who described my analysis as roadside economics. I think he has spent too much time in the villa. So just like the president of the country, his analysis at the very best also villa economics. But I wish he would spend more time analyzing the roadside economics, as he had talked about, because that is exactly where the reality of the people lies, the roadside economics. You know what, the President Tinubu are the real data in the statistics. These are also villa economic statistics that are in clear contravention or maintains no relationship with what is the actual economics of the ordinary people. So I think I needed to make that clear. And you see, it didn't take the president so long before he announced removal of fuel subsidy, and it didn't take long bureaucracy to use billions of our money, taxpayers' money, to buy private jets for the president. You know, it didn't take them long to use billions of our money to reconstruct lavish apartments for the vice president. So, but what we're simply saying is, but when it comes to the actual welfare of the Nigerian people, taxpayers, people who have voted them into office, then people start asking us to that it's going to take a lot of time. I mean, several presidents have said it. Buhari, when he came into office, unleashed hardship on the Nigerian people, says we should give him time. When Jonathan was in power, unleashed several hardship on people, says we should give them time. But unfortunately, we've seen Nigerian people become worse off at several instances. Nigerians continue to suffer. The spate of hunger and insecurity keeps increasing by the day. So what we are saying is that the issues are simple and they are not as complex as the president and his cronies want us to believe. What Nigerians are saying in actual sense is that the removal of fuel subsidy was a bad policy and it should be reversed. Nigerians deserve policy. If they are criminals feasting around the fuel subsidy, the idea is to go after the criminals, apprehend them, and make them face the full wrath of the law. And the idea of making the Nigerian people suffer for the irresponsibility of a few people should not be in the conversation.
Thank you, Sanyaolu. I'm going to cut you short there. I'd like to bring back Ortega, who unfortunately we lost a few seconds. We're happy to have you back, Ortega. I'd like to quote something that you wrote from the president's speech on Sunday night. You said, on economic reforms, the president highlighted the necessity of removing fuel subsidies and abolishing multiple foreign exchange systems to revive the economy. And the president said, and I quote, "For decades, our economy has remained anemic and taken a dip because of many misalignments that have stunted our growth." And I would like to skip some lines in the middle there. And he concludes, "I therefore took the painful yet necessary decision to remove fuel subsidies and abolish multiple foreign exchange systems, which had constituted a noose around the economic jugular of our nation and impeded our economic development and progress." That is a very brilliant statement by the president. But when you hear about the issues surrounding Dangote now and his $20 billion investment in an oil refinery, it's easy to conclude that the president is not, or the government is indeed not serious about what it says. It says A and does B. There is worry, concern, Ortega, that this $20 billion investment in a refinery that would save Nigeria billions in foreign currency spent on importing oil, that would give Nigeria energy security, is about to fail.
Thank you very much. In January this year, I recall Alhaji Aliko Dangote saying something, and let me just read, because I think I had it saved somewhere recently, which was basically saying that the Nigerian government thanks the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for his support in ensuring that the refinery gets, off the line. That is very, very important and instructive to note. At the end of the day, the government has a responsibility to all its citizens. It has a responsibility to all its businesses and all that. So let me quote. We thank President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for his support and for making our dream come true. This production, as witnessed today, would not have been possible without his visionary leadership and prompt attention to detail. His intervention at various stages cleared all impediments, thereby accelerating the actualization of the projects. We also thank the NNPC, NUPRC, and the NMDPRA for their support. That's NNPC and the two regulators for the upstream, midstream, and downstream sectors. These organizations have been our dependable partners in this historic journey. That was a quote by Alhaji Aliko Dangote in Business Day newspapers of January 13th of this year. You understand? So if you're saying here,
Ortega.
Yes, and the government has supported him from the beginning. Prior to this government coming in, the government, made an NPC, invest in that place. Even though NPC they decided not to increase their investments in it. The president continues to support him. NNPC, which sells Nigeria's crude on behalf of the Federation, has provided cargoes of crude to the refinery as at when due, whenever they needed, based on the tenders they've put out. Up until even recently, the president, again, in further support to him, permitted the purchase of crude from Nigeria in Naira to reduce the FX burden on him. This was announced, just after the last FEC 2 weeks ago. So when you talk about government supporting that refinery to succeed, he has had it 150%. However, the executive, which is headed by the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is not, you understand, going to interfere in regulators. It's important for businesses, it's important for FDIs that we're looking to bring into this country, that regulators be allowed to independently do their jobs, whether it's the CBN, whether it's NUPRC, whether it's NMDPRA. But in the same vein, we'll continue to give private sector all the support they need. Recently, the president announced, billions of nairas of investment and 9% for certain manufacturing entities in this country. That has begun, and we expect to see more of that. For the MSMEs, we've had interventions tailored directly to them. They've started receiving their funds this August. A lot of other skills development programs are going on. We've seen jobs coming out of it, 240,400 jobs in the MSME sector within the past few months.
If I can turn to Mr. Bismarck Rewane, Ortega says that the president has made the case that he won't interfere in the work of regulators. But governments I mean, on many occasions, make exceptions for their national, for their domestic, for their local champions. And Aliko Dangote is one.
Yes.
How do you think that issue has been approached or handled by the government?
I don't know what you mean by intervention. I think that the government appoints the regulatory agencies. The regulatory agencies and policymakers are supposed to give incentives to investors, both domestic and international. And when investment increases, there'll be an increase in output, GDP, and there'll also be an increase in linkages between one sector and the other. I think that is clear. But what Alhaji Aliko Dangote has been complaining about lately has been bottlenecks due to, in some cases, regulatory arbitrage, and some cases due to regulatory inefficiency. So I think that, and that by the president's announcement that he can now buy crude in Naira and can charge Naira, it set the record straight on that. But also there are still bottlenecks that need to be sorted out. But I'm not sure that itself is what the protesters are talking about, because this issue is about protesters and immediate impact. But I want to say also that yesterday alone, the Dangote refinery announced a reduction in the price of kerosene and diesel. Obviously, they're not producing petrol yet, so that should have an impact, right? Because diesel is what is used to power trucks for food and logistics costs. I think that's an impact. But what I think is that if 650 billion naira is being disbursed to small-scale businesses, which is what the announcement did, and I do know as we speak this minute, not one dime has been disbursed yet because of some bureaucratic bottlenecks. Those are the things that we need to dismantle immediately to ensure that the money gets to the people, not leak, right? Get to the people, and the people can begin to feel the impact. Because the people are impatient. They're impatient, and rightfully so. Because we've been long on talk and short on action. That is the problem.
Absolutely. I would like us to wrap up now, and I'm going to do that by first bringing in Sanyaolu. Juwon, you have made a long list of demands that you want to be met by the government. I don't know how realistic you think that is, but do you have any bare minimums, any things that you want to be addressed immediately, and maybe some others that can come later? Very briefly.
Our demands are, I believe our demands are realistic. If it is realistic for the government to continue to live fat off public resources, despite the fact that Nigeria is described to be broke according to the government, to figures from government agencies, I think, and despite the whole despite your conversations about the fact that there is no money, the government at no level they haven't reduced their extravagant lifestyle. They keep collecting huge emoluments. They keep buying private jets. If those lavish lifestyle continues to be realistic, then I think the demands and welfare of the Nigerian people, which in my view is priority, are very much realistic. That's
Sanyaolu, thank you. Ortega, Sanyaolu says that the government keeps telling Nigerians to tighten their belts. It is not tightening its own belts. You continue to live large.
That's a very interesting one, but it's also very instructive. I would like to say one thing first. This government is open to being accountable and being held accountable by the Nigerian people. We are not afraid of that. You understand? So please hold us accountable. But in the same vein, we also need to understand how things work. For instance, you say the government, they get a lot of allowances and emoluments. You need to make the distinctions. The executive, judicial office holders, the National Assembly. The National Assembly has full control over its own, over its own finances and expenses. And the National Assembly is on the, they're responsible, they're answerable to the people who put them there. As for the executive, the salaries and emoluments of people in the executive has not changed since 2007. It has remained constant. What was being earned by anybody in government in 2007 is the same thing there. And notwithstanding that fact, for instance, I'm a government employee. I have not collected any subvention from government for my office to run my office, because I understand that at this point in time, I do not think communications is where or this kind of things where the government should be spending money on. I have used my own resources. I've sought interesting ways outside, looking for outside funding to run my office, pay the people there to ensure that even in my own little way, the government is not burdened, unnecessarily burdened, by things like that. And you have a lot more people in the executive taking such steps to reduce the impact of their offices and their work on the government. We need to have that table, but we need the Nigerian people to be open to having the conversations with us. We also need them to be wary of those who seek to use, their anger and their discontent at this point in time, to play political games. That is not what Nigeria needs. Nigeria needs every single citizen's hands, including the government's hands, on deck. And if there's anyone who is going against the law, please report them to the right, agencies, authorities. We will take action. And that is the promise President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has made.
Thank you, Otega. Mr. Rewane, very briefly, it's fair to say that President Tinubu indeed inherited most of the problems that Nigeria is facing today. There have been so many years in the making, but if there's going to be a dialogue between his government and the protesting citizens, what should it be about? Very briefly.
I think what it should be about is how impactful and how rapidly he can translate his stabilization plan into results that the people can feel. Two, the point Mr. Sanyaolu made about the old image of government living large and living like sheikhs when everybody's suffering. So there should be equal sharing of the burden, and it should be not only said, but it should be seen and observed, so everybody knows that this has happened. And I can tell you in history, Nigeria, there have been 2 or 3 occasions where the Nigerian government called for sacrifice and started the sacrifice from within. And the country actually executed it during the Civil War, after, and when we were fighting with the South Africans. I think this could be another call for government to make a sacrifice, not only in substance, but also in form. So in form and substance, so that they can be believed, and the government can be believed, and that also on the other side, the protesters should understand that, it's not about whether you inherited or anything, but practical solutions. If there's no practical solution to the problem, the alternative is crisis, and crisis does not benefit anybody. So there has to be a meeting of minds, reality. That is my condition at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bismarck Rewane, and thank you, gentlemen. Sanyaolu Juwon, National Coordinator of the Take It Back movement, joining us from Lagos. Mr. Bismarck Rewane, economist and financial analyst, and Mr. Otega Ogra, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Digital Affairs. Thank you very much for your time for the show, and thank you very much for watching too and making your thoughts known. Okay, I would like to remind you that this show, African News Live Debate, broadcasts over our digital platforms on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter, and you can join us there. The name is Africa News, and we've come to the end of this edition of the Africa News Live Debate. My name is Ronald Kato, and I'll see you again on the Africa News Live Debate. Bye-bye.